Now, the BuckeyeXtra podcast with Joey Kaufman and Rob Oller from the Columbus Dispatch.
Hello, listeners. Welcome back to another edition of the BuckeyeXtra football podcast. I'm Joey Kaufman, joined by Rob Oller. We are in the stretch run of the regular season here. It's officially late November, and Ohio State is coming off a 48-10 win over UCLA last Saturday night, a rare November night game for the Buckeyes, and it was in prime time, and they really took care of business against the Bruins, although they were missing two of their best playmakers. Although I should clarify that Carnell Tate was out for the game with an unspecified injury. Jeremiah Smith was limited to 22 snaps due to another unspecified injury, and a nagging issue, as Ryan Day described it. So we largely saw the Ohio State offense put up 40-plus points without its two top receivers. How did it look, Rob?
Well, Ryan Day has to be pretty happy about that, right? First time they've had, I don't know, last time they had 40. What was it? But
Minnesota.
Yeah, Minnesota, they looked pretty good. They came out running the ball. The first series, I think they had 5 runs, all Bo Jackson, 3 passes. So that flipped a little bit. And the run game was pretty strong. Now, UCLA's run defense is awful. I think they're in the 120s or some ridiculous ranking of not very good. Let's put it that way. And Ohio State looked good running the ball. Not just Bo Jackson, but everybody. I mean, Peoples, had a breakout game, which, you have to be happy for him. He had kind of fallen down the depth chart, James Peoples, and then he makes that famous hurdle run, which was a highlight reel. But to your point, they played the second straight game without Tate, and then Jeremiah Smith looked really good in the game. It's a little confusing here because he showed no signs of having any kind of nagging injury in the game. Then afterward was wincing, acted like he'd been, needed to go to the hospital. And you never know if it tightened up on him or as he's walking out, he's doing a little play acting. I'm never accusing a guy of faking an injury. I'm not saying that. I just, these things, he's human. So, but you had Brandon Innes step in, who had the most catches, his career high 6 catches on 7 targets. You had the other receivers and the tight ends, and clearly it showed what Ohio State can do without their 2 biggest playmakers. And as I said before the podcast to Joey, well, the one constant was you had probably the best quarterback or among the best quarterbacks in college football, Julian Sayin, who was maybe not quite as on target. It was windy. He had the ankle injury. Joey can talk about that. And he didn't have his 2 best wide receivers, but he still was plenty good enough to beat the Bruins.
I think from a micro perspective and maybe from a macro perspective as well, if you were to say before the game, hey, Ohio State's not going to have Carnell Tate, it's going to have Jeremiah Smith for just 3 drives, and you're still going to put up 40 points. If you're an Ohio State fan, I think that's in some ways encouraging about your offense because they found ways to be explosive at times without just throwing the ball, because Bo Jackson and Isaiah West each had a run of 30-plus yards. All 3 backs, Jackson, Isaiah West, James Peoples, averaged 7 yards per carry, so it showed that Ohio State can move the ball in other ways rather than Julian Sayin chucking it deep to Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. So I think that's an encouraging step for the Ohio State offense. It does come with the caveat that UCLA is toward the bottom of the FBS in rush defense, but you're trying to figure out a way to balance out your offense and not just be a quick strike offense, but be an offense that can eat chunks of yards with its backs. So I think that was a positive step for Ohio State. But the elephant in the room is, are they just being very cautious with Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith? And this is a longer season where you're going to need to win at least 16 or need to at least play 16 games to win a national championship, and you need those guys for the long term. And so you're being a little more sensitive to their injuries and bring them along slowly. Or as Dave said, this is a nagging issue for Jeremiah Smith. Is it going to continue to nag him even in 2 weeks when you're at Michigan or in a Big Ten title game? What does the long-term outlook appear to be for those guys? Because I think it's clear based on this game, although it was encouraging for Ohio State's perspective to be able to manufacture more yards on the ground and be explosive in other areas, long term, they clearly need those guys. And I think Julian Sayin clearly missed those guys at times as well.
Yeah, the fear factor here is a couple of fear factors. One we mentioned real quick, just should touch on it. That's Julian Sayin, hurt his ankle a little bit, went in the tent, came out, didn't miss a down, and then, kept going. But, I'm sure Buckeye Nation held its collective breath when he went into that tent before he gave the thumbs up. But in terms of the receivers, if you've been a Buckeye fan, Ohio State fan for a decade, and not even, the name Jackson Smith and Jigba has to come up, which is, was injured in the season opener, I believe. Took some time off, attempted to come back, aggravated I believe, hamstring injury, and then missed the rest of the season. It's still a little sketchy, like whose decision was that? Was that Jackson Smith and his people who said, we got the NFL draft coming up. Why don't you just kind of lay low here, as happened previously with Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa in 2018 did not come back. Now that was a surgery situation, but anyhow, so I think there's this little cloud hovering over the situation of is Carnell Tate, how injured are they? And heaven forbid this be a situation where they're just not going to risk coming back when their NFL future, when they see what Jackson Smith and Jigba is doing in the NFL, they're like, it didn't hurt him. Didn't hurt him to sit out his senior season. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying that is, again, that is hovering over this situation.
I think that's where a lot of fans' minds go toward.
Sure.
When you have a wide receiver with a nagging injury, and for Jeremiah, it did seem to be on his, I would assume, lower half based on the way he was kind of limping and moving gingerly there. That's what you think about, and you think about the what ifs of that season, and you think about the way that injury was managed or maybe wasn't managed properly. Jackson Smith and Jigba did try to come back twice that season. He hurt it in the season opener against Notre Dame and was out the following week, but then came back against Toledo, and it might have been too early and seemed to aggravate it. They waited another month. He came back against Iowa and then pulled up on a route in that game and left and got immediate attention from the trainers. I think maybe the encouraging part for Jeremiah Smith is, even though he was limping or moving around rather slowly on the sideline, it never seemed like he had to come out of the game because of an aggravation. We didn't see anything like we saw with Jackson in 22, where he was immediately running a sideline route and had to go right to the sideline and right to the 10. That did not seem to be the case with Jeremiah. So that's, I think, probably the encouraging part. And Carnell Tate was moving around fine on the sideline last week and went through warm-ups okay last week. And the thing that's different, even though it doesn't feel like Jackson's injury was all that long ago, the sport has changed a lot in 3 years. This is a longer season. That was the 14 playoff era. And you've seen the way Ohio State has managed things, like even just the pace of play. They have really sort of viewed the regular season as just something to get through, almost like playoff or regular season NBA. And then you play harder in the playoffs. And that's kind of the case the way they've operated last year. They slowed the game down, tried to preserve players' health and mitigate the wear and tear in their bodies. So it wouldn't surprise me if this was a truly a load management situation, because their style of play is suggested. That's been at the forefront of their minds. And I think the way they're even going to manage injuries has shown that it's a real factor for them to weigh. I think that's something to keep in mind too. It's just you're planning to play if you want to win a national title, 16 games, and for some schools, if you don't get the first round bye, you might have to play 17. Penn State had to play 17 last year if they were going to win it all.
You mentioned the two words that would probably are pretty controversial in sports these days, especially in the NBA: load management. Because what you're doing is, and it makes sense to do this. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't do it with maybe your running backs, other than you have a trio there. Like Bo Jackson, why is he getting as many carries or whatever? Maybe he's down on carries too. Why you do it with the receivers, other than, to your point, that's their bread and butter. Like that's their thing. So
it's funny with the NBA, because you talk about load management in the NBA. It's been such a trend the last decade. It's arguable that it hasn't actually been helpful in terms of keeping guys healthy. All the stars in the league have Achilles injuries because of
right.
The amount of basketball they've been playing from such a young age. Football is a little different, but in terms of load management, it's probably fair to wonder how helpful it is in the long term, and maybe it's just fine to play.
Well, it's a red flag because you get into other areas. You get into fan ticket prices, everything.
Sure.
You get into, I brought my 7-year-old son to see Jeremiah Smith, and he didn't play because they're resting him. And I'm sure the old timers, old being guys maybe even from 5 years ago or less, or 10 years ago or 20, just roll their eyes at load management. But you make a great point that we're talking a different era now with more games. It's more like an NFL season. So I think that these guys, this isn't just my opinion here. This isn't just, I feel great. I have no issues, but I don't want to play. I want to save it either for the stretch run or for the NFL. I don't think it's that. I think there's some physical issue. It's just, how severe. I go back to what Ryan Day said about Tate. I think they held him out for almost preventive reasons. It wasn't like just the wording, you can sift through the wording and take it any way you want, but what was told, I think it was said, didn't he say that it was sort of a preventive deal? And
Yeah.
then you miss the second game, and like, is it still preventive? What's going on?
Yeah, Ryan Day did make it pretty clear that it was a preventative step. It seemed to be they were shouldering it, but hey, we haven't talked to them, but that's the way they've sort of framed this thing. I did mention earlier.
Let me jump into something before I forget, because with my personality, there's now and there's not now. So if I don't say it when I think it's gone into the ether. And I wrote this in my instant thoughts after the game. This is a little bit of a catch-22 with the running game, especially as it relates to Michigan, because maybe I'm overthinking this. This may be a reach, but Ohio State fans still remember what happened in that Michigan game, 13-10, and how Ohio State tried to run it up the gut, run it. So if your running game improves a little and suddenly you feel confident in your running game, and you go into the Michigan game saying we can run the ball, even though our bread and butter is being a little more up top. So, careful what you wish for with a run game that is like, hey, we've got something here. And then they try to prove that against Michigan, and they fall into that same trap. Not saying that's going to happen, but I'm sure that's crossed some minds. It crossed my mind.
Yeah.
Of like, if you got no run game, you're going to have to throw it. Now that's a whole nother set of problems that Michigan could just sit back and and guard the pass, defend the pass. But I just find that's they're kind of in this interesting situation with the running game in Michigan. That maybe is for next week, or but it did cross my mind. I don't know what you think about that.
It is funny because they are going through a stretch of the schedule where they are playing some of the worst rush defenses in the country right now, because even Purdue was 82nd nationally, and yards allowed per carry. But then UCLA was really down. UCLA is 131st out of 136 teams in rushing yards allowed per carry, 5.18 on average. And then this upcoming weekend, the Buckeyes are going to play Rutgers, who is allowing an average of 6.5 yards per carry, which, mind you, is significantly more than the 135th team, Georgia Southern, which is only giving up 5.5 yards per carry. So Rutgers is really bad. Point being, this is a stretch of this calendar where you kind of get your run game right. You are playing some teams you should be able to mow up front. You should be able to get your backs chances to hit some good holes that we could run through. And these backs,
you could,
right? And these backs will probably go a little further than we could. I think it's fair to say. But the holes should be good, and they should be able to show some burst. So you should feel good about your running game. You should get some good vibes going in that department. But I guess you're concerned they might feel too good about their running game after just running all over UCLA, that they'll be more encouraged to run the ball against Michigan. So we need Goldilocks here to feel they should feel good enough the running game, not to totally abandon it, but not so good that they decide that they want to play Michigan between the hash marks.
Exactly. And Ryan Day has always pointed out, as Urban Meyer did, and probably Jim Tressel did, that the team that wins this game, the Michigan game, is the team that runs the ball better, has more yardage. Well, do they win because they ran it well, or do they run it because they are ahead and trying to run clock? So that's the chicken.
And the other team gives up running the ball, and they have to chuck it, try to mount some sort of comeback.
Right. So that's Michigan. We'll get to that, but just to put a bow on UCLA, they were without their quarterback, Nico, and that was one of the intriguing things going into the game. Now, coming out of the game, the injuries and the wide receiver situation gave us something to write about and fans something to talk about. But going into the game, the UCLA quarterback, I wouldn't say he's automatically a run-first quarterback, but he runs the ball and runs it well. And he was out with concussion symptoms. Now, Ohio State saw him last year. He played for Tennessee, that game, and he was somewhat effective, although look at the final score, not really. But that was kind of like the intrigue going in. How does Ohio State's defense stop a running quarterback, and then he doesn't play? And it was just like, well, Groundhog Day, rinse and repeat here in terms of what the game. I saw a lot of this is boring emails or tweets and comments, and it was like, well, that's all perspective. Again, when your starting quarterback goes into the medical tent, I don't think that's boring.
I did see I remember waking up Saturday morning before the game and the news from overnight that Nico was going to be out. My first thought was, well, that takes away maybe the one interesting storyline. That was before we knew about the status of the wide receivers. But at that stage, it felt like that was kind of your intriguing subplot to the game, not only because it was Nico's return to the Horseshoe after being in Tennessee last year. Even the Panera Bread on Lane Avenue had their sign said Nico at the Shoe Part 2. So that was in terms of your intrigue, that was it. And I think it was also maybe going to give us a better sense of how the Ohio State defense was prepared for a running quarterback. They did well early in the year at Washington, but they're going to face a running quarterback in the game and Bryce Underwood at the end of the year. And so it's 2 weeks before you go to Ann Arbor. Maybe you want to be able to kind of check the pulse of your ability to monitor and deal with a quarterback who can move, and not having him really, I think, removed a lot of the drama or intrigue of checking out the Ohio State defense, because otherwise there was not much that UCLA was going to do offensively with Luke Duncan as their starting quarterback, who had never attempted a pass in college and only appeared in one game in his career with the Bruins, that they were going to be able to do against Ohio State.
I don't even have the stats in front of me. I should. What did UCLA throw for?
54.
54 yards passing.
150.
154. Well, I've seen worse.
Yeah.
I mean, for a guy that's never thrown a pass, you know.
It was a lot
Well,
of just dump off stuff and stuff to the sideline. They did not seem to really take a whole bunch of risks with him. He did okay. They felt like UCLA was just trying not to hurt him.
Lincoln Keenholz came in, early in the fourth, midway through the fourth.
Midway through the fourth, and decided to lower his shoulder and try to run over a UCLA defender on a run, which I think they like his athleticism and gamer mentality, or just sort of old school. But I don't know if you want your backup quarterback necessarily trying to steamroll a guy in a 40-point blowout in the fourth quarter there.
He did throw a touchdown pass, correct? Or didn't he?
No.
He didn't? I was on my way down the elevator. I thought somebody in the elevator said, "Hey, he threw a touchdown." I said, "Okay." Well.
He had a nice throw to, I think it was Nate Roberts along the sideline on the fourth quarter.
Yeah, okay. By the time I got down there, it was pretty much over. Yeah, well, you know what, son, you're not in high school anymore. Leave the shoulder drop to the running backs or to the fullback tight end combo guy. Get down on the field, slide, because you never, the backup quarterback. He's one play away, Joey. One snap away.
See, and Julian Sain's ankle had to get taped, so I think they also want to protect Lincoln Keenholz's his health too.
Yeah, and those ankles usually, they get worse a couple days after the game. If you're playing on adrenaline, they did tape it up. I saw there was tape on the ankle. How is that going to affect him? Well, he's essentially has 2 weeks to get ready for Michigan. Rutgers, which has one player, their running back.
Yeah,
that's pretty much all they have. They have Greg Schiano, trick play artist, and they have a running back, and they have an awful run defense, and the Scarlet Knights need help.
This is probably a minor housekeeping note from the game, but they did improve the record following the win over UCLA to 10-0 overall. At this point, they're basically a virtual lock to make the playoff.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? We didn't talk about the kickoff return either.
No, you want to give Lorenzo Styles Jr. his due?
Yeah. He took the ball at the goal line, and then it was a little joke afterward that he said to Day that I decided if I brought it out, I better take it all the way. And Day said, "Yeah, you're right about that. Essentially, you better if you're not gonna whatever, let it hit in the end zone and take it bring it out." Then you better go the whole distance. And he did. He showed some flash. Somebody said he's the fastest player on the team. But I don't know if that's true, but he did. He showed some burst there.
Yeah, especially
the first since 2010. Is that right?
Right. Jordan Hall against Michigan in 2010.
Okay. And then the last 100-yarder since, I believe, Ted Ginn Jr. in 2005.
That's correct. So not bad.
Not bad. They needed something like that. Their special teams have been kind of meh, I would say, for most of the season.
They've looked a little better in last couple of weeks. It seems like Brendan Ennis has got a little more juice on some of the punt returns they've had, and I think also just Joey McGuire had a 51-yard punt against UCLA. That was first 50-yarder for him since the Texas game. So that was good. Not that you want to see Ohio State punting all that much, but hey, games are going to get a little more competitive. You're going to play the competition's about to ramp up. Stuff like that, like field position, is going to probably matter a little more. So I think overall, special teams was maybe trending upward in recent weeks after it seemed to be trending downward at Wisconsin, but they couldn't seem to punt all that far, and they were giving up long gains to the Wisconsin punter.
Rankings, Ohio State won. At least we'll find out Tuesday.
Yeah, I don't think they'll hold on to that spot for a third straight week. They're number one. They are going to make the playoff at this point. Even if they were to suffer a stunning upset to Rutgers and lose again to Michigan in the game, they're number one right now. At worst, they would finish the regular season 10-2. Same record as last year when they made the playoff. No 2-loss team from the Big Ten or SEC missed it last year. So I think that's kind of the threshold that seems to be in this day and age. And this is a more crowded field this year, so maybe it's a little different. But I think generally that 10-2, 9-3 kind of cutoff point is sort of the bar you need to clear to make the field, especially in the Big Ten and SEC. If you get to that 10-2, 11-1, you're going to be in the field, or maybe 12-0 for Ohio State, maybe 13-0 if they win 3 in a row here.
Well, is there a team out there that you think they should be worried about? I was just looking down the list. You don't know. Still, I'm not sure about Indiana. That'll be, if it's a Big Ten championship game matchup against the Hoosiers. We've talked about this. That'd be pretty exciting because you just don't know what Indiana is, and it would be in their backyard. And I think Texas A&M, they had to have a comeback against unranked South Carolina, but they did come back and win, and I think their defense is decent. But I'm going to write about this at some point. Ryan Day said, we're gonna turn up the gas or whatever it was. We're gonna, put the pedal to the metal at some point here soon. And everyone's assumed that was going to be UCLA, Rutgers, get ready for Michigan. And maybe what I was thinking is we have not seen Ohio State yet in a dome indoors. And with this firepower that they have with the 2 receivers, this is a team that should improve fairly dramatically indoors.
They played well indoors last year
They did. And I think that maybe that's where the gas gets turned up, is once we get indoors, because once they go, well, they'll have the Rose Bowl, which is not, but once they go indoors, I think, look out. Their offense, you might see some, 40, 50 point. Of course, they'll be against better teams, but I think the indoor thing has been, sort of underplayed a little bit.
Presuming they don't shut down their receivers.
Yeah, it all comes back to that, doesn't it, Joey? Like,
that was sarcasm.
Well, hey, I know, but there's a tinge of in there for Buckeye Nation, for Ohio State fans of, boy, these guys better not be holding out on us. These guys better not be more injured than they're letting on, that type of thing. We shall see. I tend to think, I'm with you. I think it's a load management situation.
Yeah. I mean, that's my feel. Well, by the way, is this weekend's game against Rutgers? Are they playing East Coast UCLA, or do they just play West Coast Rutgers?
Yeah. I'm on record that I'm old school, so UCLA will always have a little higher standing. When I was a kid, UCLA broke Ohio State's heart in the 75, 76, technically, I guess, Rose Bowl, Archie's senior season. All Ohio State had to do was win. They had beaten UCLA early in the season out in the, I believe, Coliseum. At that point, that's before UCLA had gone played their regular season in the Rose Bowl, which I think started in 82, I believe. And that game was 75, 76, and Dick Vermeil and Wendell Tyler and John Shara. See, I still remember these. I remember these names better than I remember the current players. So to me, UCLA, no matter what the scoreboard says and the standings and record says, is always going to have a little bit of that mystique, especially in basketball, but even in football. They were pretty good back then. But to your point, they haven't been for a while, and so they kind of are the West Coast Rutgers.
Well, Rutgers had a lot of mystique to 19th century ball watchers.
I'm not that old.
No, but I guess to some they had the mystique of tangling with Princeton in the 1860s.
First game, right? First college game, I think.
You're right, birthplace of college football, really a powerhouse of the Gilded Age. Um, but no, but I made the UCLA comparison because the Big Ten has added both of these schools in the last 15 years, and Rutgers was truly just grabbing the television market of New York, and that allowed the Big Ten to have its cable network and more homes and be in more markets that are quote unquote a Big Ten market. And UCLA's athletic department has a much better history and tradition than Rutgers and all that. But in the sport that matters, college football, this is the second straight year where it's a Big Ten team that finishes above 500 and makes a bowl game. And so to me, the net positive for the Big Ten at this stage of the game is really just a team that brought in the Los Angeles market. And granted, you already had USC come into the fold, but USC wanted to bring its traditional rival, and so they get a +1 to bring into the Big Ten and UCLA. But right now, that's UCLA's impact, is it's allowing the Big Ten to plant its flag in Los Angeles, the nation's #2 media market, because the on-field edition is next to nothing, really.
Well, let me ask you, Joey, you're a West Coast SoCal guy, Mr. Burbank, home of former home, maybe current home of the Tonight Show out there when it was
Our home, Jimmy Fallon moved to New York.
What is the general vibe? Your dad's a big USC, SC fan. What's the vibe about them joining the Big Ten? I can't believe that old school Pac-8, Pac-10, Pac-12, whatever fans we're real happy about that. I mean, there's something again about West Coast, and like then we're going out with these Midwesterners, and I know them set the money aside, set the CTV thing aside, just in terms of a fan. Was there a little bit of like, why are we doing this?
I think if you're maybe a younger fan, it matters less to you. If you're, I think, an older generation, remember you grew up watching the Pac-8, the Pac-10, or the Pac-12, it matters to you. And also just what's your lifestyle like? Do you like going to the games? Because that's the other thing too, is there were hardly any UCLA fans in Columbus for the game. And granted, this is a team that was 3-6 and became 3-7 after Saturday's loss and is playing with an interim coach. But I mean, that was as, I think, sparse of a visiting crowd in that north east section of the stadium that I really had seen in quite some time. It was dark, and maybe my view wasn't all that sort of maybe and colors it, but it felt like there were nobody there. So if you're a USC UCLA fan, I mean, it was much easier you'd go to the Bay Area for the weekender game against Cal or Stanford every year. You'd maybe go to Phoenix to see them play Arizona State. That's another, you lose all your drivable games. And I think that's a big change, where if you're somebody like going to the games, it makes it harder to travel with the team. If you're trying to do what really ends up being a lot of cross country flights, or at least flights that you're going 2-3 times. So I think that's where it sort of loses some of it for the West Coast fans, is every road game really is a cross country haul.
Right. Yeah. Well, you get to go up to Oregon, Washington. Oh, for the West Coast. Oh, yeah, not just.
So if you were,
for the entire West Coast for sure. I always thought that they should have. Well, they should have brought Stanford, Cal on and had a division, and they could have just played up and down the coast and then had some crossover stuff. But money wins, and they didn't bring in enough eyeballs. So
yeah, UCLA. Their 4 Big Ten road games are Northwestern, Michigan State, Indiana, and Ohio State this year. And none of those are all that manageable. They do put their, and then they're at USC, their last Big Ten game, road game.
Yeah. Well, this last thing here, we'll just touch on it maybe. Big Ten championship game, where Ohio State is with that. We don't have all the details, but they need to beat Michigan. Ohio State needs to beat Michigan to probably play in the Big Ten championship game. If things play out, if they play out like you would think, with Oregon winning out, with Indiana winning out, And I think there might even be, I don't know, USC and Michigan, but
Yeah, the cleanest way for Ohio State to make it Indianapolis and play in the Big Ten championship game is to win its remaining 2 games of the regular season against Rutgers and then Michigan, because behind them in the standings, there's a cluster of 6-1 teams. You have Michigan, which is 6-1. Oregon and USC are both 6-1, and the winner of that game on Saturday between Oregon and USC is going to be 7. So if Ohio State were to trip in either one of these games here, you'd have to then start working through some tiebreakers. And if they lose to Michigan, you wouldn't have the head-to-head advantage either. So
right, I think it does not bode well. I just gave it a quick look a couple of weeks ago, actually. I think because it goes head-to-head and then goes into common opponents, which you would, and then it gets into common opponents within the Big Ten. I think Oregon more than likely, I know at least Oregon comes out ahead of Ohio State on that one. If Ohio State loses to Michigan, because they've just played a higher quality of opponent. So
I think what's interesting for this year too is when we get closer to the end of the regular season and then the conference championship weekend, there'll be some discussion about whether it's actually advantageous at all to play in that conference championship game, because look at last year, all of those teams lost in the quarterfinals, although that does come with, I think, a pretty big caveat and disclaimer that the seeding structure this year is totally different. So some of those conference champion winners, Boise State was one of them, and I'm trying to remember the big
SMU.
SMU was the other. No, SMU lost.
Arizona State.
Arizona State was the other conference champion. So all those teams, Arizona State was the Big 12 champion. Boise State was the Group of 5 champion. And then you had Georgia and Oregon, SEC and Big Ten champs. All of them lost in the quarterfinals, but it wasn't a straight seeding model.
Right.
So the thought was maybe they all got rusty during the bye week, but those were also not deemed the 4 highest seeds. So
well, you definitely save your body. If you want to talk about load management, instead of load managing a player, load manage a game.
Yeah. I think for Ohio State, their motivation is to do what they didn't do last year. They didn't beat Michigan. They didn't win the Big Ten national championship. I mean, it would be a more impressive season to have a 16-0 national champion where you won the Big Ten, you beat Michigan, and you're the national champion. So I think that's what they're kind of playing for, is to get the sort of the whole enchilada.
Yeah, which they've never done back-to-back national titles. Came very close in 68, 69. Lost to Michigan that year in 69. They would have been national title. They would have had back-to-back and gone down as kind of one of the dynasty, one of the greatest teams ever. Instead, Super Softs kind of underperformed there. Thanks, Woody.
Woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Yep.
We'll have more early next week after Ohio State plays Rutgers, and then certainly looking ahead to Ohio State, Michigan, coming up not too far away. We're recording this Monday, so how many days is that? 12 days?
12 days of Christmas.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody, for joining us on another edition of the Buckeye Extra podcast. If you like this podcast, please give us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever else you get your podcasts. Thanks for joining us.